scene, which we can enjoy now.
Don't want to stay here.
Nora, what happened? That's Jonas Slides and his wife. They've been caretakers here for years. She's blind, you know.
I'm not going to stay here.
Well, Doctor, it looks like we have a real case of hysteria on our hands.
I think she's just a little upset, not hysterical.
Right.
Good evening.
Hello, my dear.
There you go. That probably
This is
suits
my
it
wife.
better.
These are our guests. Ruth Bridges, Dr. Trent. You know Watson Pritchard, of course. Nora Manning, and this is Lance Schroeder.
Get me out of here.
Now, what about the 10,000?
I don't care. He wants to kill me.
Who wants to kill you?
Mr. Lawrence.
All right. Yes, that was the most exciting scene I could find. That was kind of good for radio. In that scene, what I found most interesting was that Vincent Price's character goes over to the doctor and says, "I think we've got a case of her being hysterical."
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor says, no, I think she's just upset, which really kind of surprised me because I felt earlier on when the doctor quickly diagnosed her as being hysterical, it was based on really circumstantial evidence. Yet now she's looking much more distressed. But Zeke, you were saying maybe there's another reading of that.
Yeah, so obviously if you're listening, you haven't watched, you can't see what the caretakers look like, but one of the caretakers, the blind wife, is actually the person who was in the cellar and was scaring, can't remember her name, but was scaring her. So, and I think now the assumption is with everyone that she did see her, and so they know that now, and they're like, oh, you did see someone, but it's actually just the caretaker and you got spooked. So now I don't think she's hysterical, because I think the point of that is to be that they thought that she was seeing something supernatural, but she saw something real, and now she's just distressed.
Yeah, look, and I think what's the most interesting thing about this is, like with any popular culture, there are moments where it can be an entry point to knowledge, what I'm calling an entry point, in my professional opinion. So I think what we're witnessing here is a possible entry point into further explaining and understanding what it means to be called hysterical as a woman. Because I do feel that as soon as I did a Google web search on hysteria, women being labeled as hysterical, it's enormous, the amount of information about this term and the way in which it's been employed, often by male doctors or psychiatrists, or even back in the medieval period, Greek period, right? It has, like Wikipedia, a huge deep dive. I'm not going to go into it now because I've literally only just looked at it before we went on air. But it was one of these wonderful moments of through something as what some people would label as trivial, as popular culture from 1959, starring Vincent Price, House on Haunted Hill, can be an avenue for learning. So what we're going to do here as part of our investigation is expand our research to include female hysteria. I mean, we did a bit on the Bitchstill test last week, talking about how that scene may have been a really progressive scene around having two female characters. But yeah, let's see. Maybe this term hysteria and its use and abuse in terms of categorizing various forms of mental health issues, and the politics around that might be quite interesting.
There was a play. Oh, sorry. Sorry. I thought we were still talking. No, you put the movie back on. I'll talk afterwards.
No. I'm just going to show people the scene for the setup for the next point.
Brilliant.
So there was a play?
Oh yeah, there's a play that I saw about 6 or 7 years ago called In the Next Room, or the Vibrator Play, which is about the invention of a medicinal vibrator. Yes, one of those. In either the 18th or the 19th century, because to treat women's hysteria, which was sexual unfulfillment and frustration. And the attitudes towards hysterical, quote unquote, hysterical women in that, and their changed
Right.
attitude after they have been stimulated in that play was.
Yes.
It was a comedy. There was a lot of chuckles given out of ha ha ha. Isn't it funny that this thing does this? And they're all trying to be polite and Victorian about it. But it also really did shine a very big light on how we really weren't treating women particularly well, and just writing off legitimate grievances as, oh, she's just hysterical, take her down to the doctor.
Yeah. And what I'm also recognizing, probably we need a set up a special with a female contributor
Yeah.
onto the show in the future.
And unfortunately,
Like-
it's be a special, but yeah.
We've still got at least 20 episodes probably left of us watching House on Haunted Hill. So
That's
in those
true.
next 20 episodes, we'll set up a
It's gotta be
a female
more
analysis.
than 20.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. So we've got a comment on Stream Chat saying that's a pretty spooky looking head in the box. And that's exactly right. As you know, in our analysis of 5 minutes of House on Haunted Hill, what we've been doing is looking for spooky moments and measuring it against the what is it? The 5 stages of fear that have been outlined in the article called Analysis of Camera Work in Horror Movies. Now, the 5 stages of fear, for those following at home, are terror, horror, repulsion, recovery, and background. So here, in the last 5 minutes, in the 5 minutes we saw, we had this scene where she opens up the box, which I like to think then got employed by Seven, right? The scene 7, what's in the box?
What's in the box?
What's in the box?
I was
Yeah.
thinking it, but I didn't want to be the one to say it.
I think you got to. We're all about intertextuality here. So we have here a box scene, right? She goes into her room, like Vincent Price has just knocked on the door saying, oh, it's nearly midnight, Nora. We're all meeting downstairs. She goes into her room and opens the box, which I assume is a box containing her, I don't know, makeup or material that she will be using to then go downstairs to meet everyone. But instead there is this wonderful head, very jelly-like to me, that was there. That was a supreme moment of Category 3, repulsion. Now, repulsion's characterized by evoking the feeling of disgust and detachment in the viewer. The emotion can be directed to either an object or a situation. It could contain moments showing physical pain, gore, unacceptable social behavior, or aversive, stressful situations, such as being trapped in the dark. So this is a gore moment to me. This is
right.
Do you feel a level of gore, 1959 gore, as
Oh,
far as 59 could do?
by 1959 standards, that's the Human Centipede. That is supremely gory by late 1950s standards.
So we're talking total media panic of parents, a kid's traumatized for watching this too young, and this is one of those scenes where they can't sleep. They have to have the lights on in bed, right, after watching it. So there you go. That was at minute 33, 32 seconds. We've met repulsion, and then so then the scene we listened to was a recovery scene where she kind of went downstairs. I think she was holding it together really well after seeing that head. She races downstairs, and then that's right, the caretaker or the housekeeper kind of says, "Escape, he's going to kill you." I think she's holding it together well. I mean, mainly this is a movie about Nora. The more we're watching it, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
Seems like it. Seems like she is probably the main
Yep.
character.
So that's where we are.
One thing I do want
Yes.
to note is, so the spooky lady, and she was in a wine barrel before, in the cellar.
Wow.
But that was
Yeah.
the caretaker lady. It looks exactly the same. There's
No,
no,
no, no, no, no.
difference.
No. I think the woman that was put in the because there was that scene where we see the acid vat, and the story goes that the previous owner of the house killed his wife by throwing her into an acid vat.
Yeah.
So maybe this is her head. I like it. It's good speculation.
could be.
But the caretakers are different, right? The caretakers is really
I don't know, because at least when Nora was in that cupboard or whatever, not a cupboard, but the room,
yeah.
the lady that was there looks exactly the same as the caretaker lady who's blind.
Yeah.
And then she weirdly... One thing I want to... How does she... Because she levitates out of the room.
Well, I think this is playing to your point that, maybe she is suffering a delusion. At this point, it's quite clever, right? I mean, the audience is sitting there going, well, maybe these are scenes that we're seeing
through her
eyes. And that in fact, this can be explained purely as being the caretakers do look a bit spooky. Right? Blind wife, mother, female.
Yeah, I wonder. I'm interested to see what it is, because it's kind of just seems like, I don't know, more questions about what the hell are the caretakers doing.
I got to admit, there's a certain misogyny in this film. Like, the women are just getting treated badly throughout this film. Like the wife, Vincent Price's wife's character, is getting death threats against her, feels like she's under threat. Nora, of all the characters, is the one that's always being attacked by the apparitions. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
No.
All right, let's play a short break music here on Bluesy Vibes. To set up our next point. That doesn't give me enough time to scroll up to where I am. Anyway, a review, Australia. I want to play another clip on this so that Marcus knows kind of what we're doing. So basically, Australia, it's a board game, but it's set in the universe envisioned by Neil Gaiman in his short story, A Study in Emerald. And basically, A Study in Emerald sets up this idea of the old ones, the Lovecraftian old ones, the Cthulhu and other abominations had been able to get back into Earth in the medieval period, overthrow humans and become the dominant ones. And A Study in Emerald is set during the late 1800s in the world of Sherlock Holmes. But I'll unpack that more. But before we do this, what I want to do is play a short clip that was... it's on the website, so if you go to the Australia website, AUZ, Z for Zombies website, it's a short clip. They have basically filling in the background to it. And what I want to talk about a bit is the world building of this game and what it's doing. So let's listen to this now.
The creatures, known as the Old Ones, invaded Europe over 700 years ago. Civilization then was not equipped to deal with such powerful beings, and quickly submitted to their rule. Such was the state of the world, until a movement arose that shook the foundations of the old order. The Restorationists, including Sherlock Holmes and Prince Kropotkin, lit a fuse that resulted in a war for control of the world. Fortune, with the aid of dynamite, favored the humans, and the Old Ones were defeated. The world was devastated by this war. Cities lay in ruins, and poison had been spread across the land by the accursed Old Ones. Starvation looked to be the future for the survivors. Now free from the dictates of the Old Ones, a few intrepid adventurers set out to explore the planet. To their surprise, they discovered a new continent, quickly named Australia. Here seemed to be a solution to the food shortages of the Northern Hemisphere. Prospectors and colonists were dispatched to survey and settle the land, to mine for resources and establish farms. There was a reason why Australia remained unknown to humanity. When the Old Ones first appeared, they did so here, in the wastes beyond the Great Dividing Range. Here they built temples and created a refuge that they could withdraw to if necessary. As settlements, the Old Ones awoken from their slumber. A new war is coming, one that will be fought in the arid lands of Australia. Will humanity prevail again, or will the Old Ones reap their revenge?
All right, then it goes into a little bit of the game mechanics, but we'll get around to that in a second. What I want to talk about is, has anyone here ever read any H.P. Lovecraft?
Attempted to.
Because, look, I mean, let's unpack quickly H.P. Lovecraft. What's interesting about H.P. Lovecraft is his notorious rampant racism.
Racism and anti-Semitism.
Yes, yes. So it's such a problematic text, and in many ways it's interesting because, it's so interesting when there's a established mythos which is incredibly popular. Well, you could point to J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter space, or in this case H.P. Lovecraft and the Cthulhu mythos. That it's what happens when the author is just a little kind of problematic, where they're racist, they're a bit rotten, and in H.P. Lovecraft's case, he is so anti-Semitic, so racist, yet that very racism and anti-Semitism kind of is, in a way, baked into a worldview which filters into the reason why he's writing this Cthulhu stuff, right? That he's so fearful of the world around him, the changes which are occurring at that period in time in the 1920s, that, the Cthulhu space manifests that for him, right? This kind of nameless, unspeakable other that is corrupting and mysterious. It's interesting. How did you find trying to read some Cthulhu or Lovecraft stuff?
Oh, it's very impenetrable. He just tends to waffle on. His prose is exceptionally purple. I like to imagine that if he and Ernest Hemingway had ever met, they would have fought to the death using blunt knives over just a fundamental difference in their approach to writing prose. There's no subtlety with Lovecraft, and he just goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on before he actually gets to the point.
There's a great piece I'll quickly show now. It's a 36-second clip from a documentary on Lovecraft, and this is Neil Gaiman talking about his thoughts on Lovecraft, and very much summing up your points as well, Marcus, about the impenetrableness of the prose. I mean, I like the world building of it. I'm a horror fan, so I love the idea of the unspeakable, unknowable, reality-breaking other. But Gaiman, really sums it up nicely.
And there are other things you can make fun of him for. The tendency to write in the first person and to keep writing. The ultimate parodic Lovecraftian phrase is somebody going mad while writing and something's coming up. I can hear them now coming up these steps. Their hellish tentacles are squirming at the door. Ayah, Shub Niggurath, the beast with 1,000 young. Fatang, fatang. And you're done. ... You disappear in a burst of ellipses and italics.
It's so well thought. So that's game. And of course, what's interesting about this board game, right? So I love playing board games, and this one I came across because I like the flavor of it, right? Set in this kind of alternate 1930s Australia where the Cthulhu have been beaten back and colonization has started to occur, and they've discovered Australia, as the clip we heard says. And then we're in this kind of this colonialism push in the 1930s, and then, they've stumbled across the Cthulhu again. So I like that flavor, but what really fascinated me was then finding out it was based on this Gaiman short story, which, hearing how Gaiman talks about Lovecraft, you're surprised that he was invited to write this short story. So I was looking at TV tropes, which Marcus put us on to last week, or at least reminded me of last week, and there's a number of tropes which they discuss in terms of Gaiman's 2003 short story, A Study in Emerald. And one of them is this phrase called... Well, there are two phrases I want to talk about quickly here. One is intercontinuity crossover, and the second one is that it's a crack fic. So the first one, intercontinuity crossover, and this is because the short story combines Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos with Sherlock Holmes's, Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes's space, right? An intercontinuity crossover, as defined by TV tropes, is a crossover between two works that are not within the same canon or continuity. So examples they give would be, for example, if Jay and Silent Bob turned up in Scream 3. They're in different universes, but you could do a what's referred to here as an intercontinuity crossover, where those two different franchises show up in each other's texts. This is different from if the cast of Cheers turned up in Frasier, because that is a crossover of two related shows, which exist canonically in the same universe, yet these are not canonically in the same universe. So this first made me think of, is intercontinuity crossover something that we've encountered quite a lot? Is it something that we think is interesting, right? Like when we see intercontinuity crossover texts, in this case Cthulhu meeting Sherlock Holmes, is that something we'd be interested in?
Oh, absolutely. It just brings to mind the graphic novel Watchmen, which is all about trying to solve a series of murders when the world is on the brink of Armageddon. Just hearing about Sherlock Holmes and Cthulhu immediately makes you think of Holmes trying to solve a murder that has been potentially done by Cthulhu cultists, and he ends up unraveling something much bigger, as the characters of Lovecraft fiction often do.
What's interesting about the intercontinuity crossover here is that Gaiman was interviewed about writing this short story, which he enjoyed writing, but he was interviewed about doing it. And what's interesting to me about this is that at first he didn't think it would work, because he's quoted as saying these two universes are antithetical, right? That is that in the Holmes universe, in Arthur Conan Doyle's Holmes universe, every mystery has a solution that can be found with the application of logic and reason, which Gaiman says is fundamentally at odds with the worldview of H.P. Lovecraft, who argues that there are some things that are and should be completely unknowable, and applying logic and rationality to them will only result in madness. So he's saying, these two universes just don't fit. The Conan Doyle Holmes world is one of logic and rationality, where it's all about reading. The application of logic and rationality to solve a problem. Yet the Lovecraft Cthulhu space is about how logic and rationality can't be applied to these things because they are ultimately reality destroying, and you will go mad. So what's interesting reading about this is that Gaiman then, he was asked to do this. He said it couldn't be done. And then he said, actually, maybe it could be done if the setting was a location, it was a time in which logic and rationality had lost. That they had been abandoned, and the status quo was now the illogical and irrational, which is a Cthulhu world. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Oh, okay." So then he said, he realized at that point, actually, I do want to write this. I do want to figure out how I can write this, which is this kind of crack fic moment that they talk about in TV tropes, where you have a piece of fiction work. It could be a fan fiction piece, or in this case, Gaiman challenging himself to write something in this space, which is innately challenging. It's something which is the definition here is that it's fan fiction on crack, so it's crack fic. They say here that it's the easiest type of fan fiction to write, and yet it's one of the hardest to write well. Right? People can write these kind of outlandish things. The crack fics are not merely humorous. In fact, in many cases, it doesn't have to be humorous. While it's similar to alternate universe fiction in that they both change some fundamental aspects of the source material, it is different in that the crack fic is any story whose premise and events would be completely implausible in canon. So I guess, in the canon of Holmes, like Conan Doyle's Holmes, the Cthulhu concept is just implausible, right? It's just crazy, right? The reality is dry and unknowable. But Gaiman challenging himself to write a piece where he could include the bizarre setting of a Cthulhu-dominated Europe with Holmes being a figure within that. Is quite. Did you read the short story yet?
Unfortunately, I did not.
Okay. I keep. This is 2 weeks of me building this up. 3 weeks, maybe. Lathering so much praise on this piece. Is this like, wow, I got to read this kind of vibe coming from? No.
Yeah, no. Look, in my mind, it definitely is. Yes, I've got to read this kind of vibe. But I have been exceptionally busy. Doing my planning at work. Generally just busy around the house, cleaning.
It's a short story.
It's a short story, and
it is free to get. You can get a Gaiman's own website.
Well, it figures it'd be free given that it's based on two franchises that are explicitly in the public domain.
But this was part of an anthology text, I guess, which was anyway. He has published it himself. I mean, well, it was part of a anthology collection, but now is on his website. As actually, very interestingly, it's laid out as a late 1800s newspaper article. So it's got this wonderful typesetting, and then it has these ads for showing how bizarre the world is. You got like this kind of Vlad the Impaler tonic that Vlad's selling, the Jekyll and Hyde imbiber fluid that you can have just to be the real you. So it's a very clever text.
You've actually just reminded me, one of the best quotes I've ever heard about writing is Dracula is in the public domain, so why isn't he in your short story?
Dracula is what?
Dracula is in the public domain.
Oh, he is?
Yeah, because Bram Stoker passed away an exceptionally long time ago, and if something goes 70 years after the death of the author, it becomes public domain. So Dracula's in the public domain, anybody can use him, so why is he not in the short story that you're writing?
Oh, yeah, right, yeah. Why would you not put Dracula in everything then, right? Because if he's in public domain, yeah, why wouldn't he? What's interesting there, of course, is that, yeah, Bram Stoker's version of Dracula is public domain, but Universal Cinema or Studios' version of Dracula isn't. So that Bela Lugosi figure, Dracula, you can't just put in your piece. In fact, no movie version of Dracula. Maybe Nosferatu might be fallen into public domain by now.
They've made remakes of Nosferatu, so you can't use Count Lock.
Yeah. So that likeliness. So yeah, it's always a bit of a bind that period. But then you do get great texts like Alan Moore's League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which kind of deep trawls through public domain figures to get Captain Nemo from 70, how many leagues underneath the ocean?
20,000 leagues under the sea.
Mina Harker from Bram Stoker's Dracula. Who else is in that?
Jekyll and Hyde. Alan Quatermain from King Solomon's Mines. Moriarty's in there. I believe that M from James Bond is also in there.
That's right.
And he's definitely not in public domain yet.
Yeah. But I think what's interesting to me as I was reading into this, the Neil Gaiman piece, is that there's a twist at the end, right? So as I've set up the idea that Neil Gaiman set himself this challenge to create a short story set in Arthur Conan Doyle's Holmes world, which is all full of irrational, but in a Lovecraftian kind of radical reinvention of it. What's interesting is throughout the story, the writer refers to the detective figure as my friend, right? Never says Holmes directly. And that, I was reading, is often what happens when people are writing fan fiction, or an author is writing a fiction piece set in a proprietary domain, that you don't have access. You can't just say the main character because it's proprietarily owned. So you get around that by just saying my friend all the time. And the reader knows, oh, right, they're referring to, James Bond. But they couldn't put James Bond there because James Bond, they would get sued. So yeah, Gaiman does that throughout it. But part of that is the twist that I won't reveal. So talking a little bit about this board game, so what's interesting to me is that, again, much like the deep dive into women's hysteria through House on Haunted Hill, what's interesting about Australia to me is that, it's this deep dive into this Gaiman short story and the challenge you can set yourself in writing these, what are they called?
Crackfix?
Crackfix and...
Intercontinuity crossovers.
Oh, you're so good at this! You'd be great at bingo or something. Intercontinuity crossovers. Yep,
I'd
yep.
like to host bingo. That'd be fun.
You do a good job. So a little bit about the board game, though. It was released in 2018. It involves Lovecraft and Eldritch abominations.
Just very briefly, so I feel we should just say for those at home who are not watching the stream, it's Australia spelled with a Z instead of an S.
Yeah. And there is a expansion called Tasmania, again with an Z, sort of an S. And the Z's there, obviously, because there are zombies in it. So, yeah. Involves, so it's an economic exploration, fantasy, and horror genre game. It's designed by Martin Wallace, who's UK-based, which I think is important, as I'll discuss in a second. The mechanisms... I don't know if you play many board games, Marcus, but I'm going to read out the mechanisms that are involved in this board game. You have action retrieval, right? Which is when you put a piece down on the board, you have to take pieces, right? So it's that kind of act of you play the game by putting like a meeple down or a counter down, and then you get to put other things down. It's cooperative or semi-cooperative, right? You're with other players colonizing Australia, and then you hit the Cthulhu. It's a hexagonal grid, so it has a bit of a wargaming vibe to it. You're building railway lines and farms, right? Which is not at all action-based, but is part of what appeals about this game to many people. Semi-cooperative, it can be solo and solitaire-based. It has a sudden death ending, where if the Cthulhu make it to your port and kill all your army units, they win the game immediately because they've been able to escape Australia and get out to the world. And there's a time track. I want to play a quick clip because part of the thing that I was interested in with this board game was, are there any kind of social influences, let's call them social influences out there that are promoting this piece, cultural attractors or activators. And it turns out that Trey Parker from South Park came on Dice Tower, which is a very popular board gaming YouTube site, naming his top 10 games of all time. And at number 5, he said Australia. And I want to play a little bit about why he thought this board game was particularly fantastic. So we'll have a listen to Trey Parker, one of the writers of South Park now.
This will give it away. It's the only Cthulhu game on my list, but it's not really a Cthulhu game, but it is.
Oh, wait a minute. I think I know what this is, and this is a great game. Is it a Martin Wallace game?
Yes.
Australia?
Yes.
Whoa!
Dude, no.
Yeah.
This is a good pick. I like this game a lot.
No, you don't like it?
I like it. No, I like it.
okay.
I do. I just was not expecting this whatsoever.
I racked my brain over trying to figure out how to justify this in my list based
it's your
on what I
top
said.
10 games.
But again,
yeah.
I
don't justify nothing here.
No, pick another one.
Because again, I can't really say in this game who I am. I know what I'm trying to accomplish. Obviously,
Right.
you're all just going to Australia and you're trying to colonize it and get it. But unfortunately, there are these giant Cthulhu monsters everywhere, and you all have to. If you don't work together somewhat,
yes,
and you're building your own farms, you're making your own railroads, you're doing all that common stuff. But at some point, these things are going to wake up.
Yep.
And if you don't all work together, because if one of them gets to anyone's port and destroys it, game ends, and then you do the scores, but the Cthulhu side's going to win.
Yeah, great old ones win.
Yeah, and so you're like, oh, okay, I'm doing this great job, and Chris isn't doing a great job, but I better go help him fight those things because then I'm not going to win.
Right.
And I just think that could. I don't know a ton of other games that do that, and I think it's so cool.
So this is semi-co-op?
It's
not
It's
really.
really not.
They score a lot of points.
Right. And if you...
They eat...
What I like about that clip is the idea of, you're playing a game where you have to work together, but you're competing with each other. So you're not helping everyone as much as you could. It's like, I don't want to lose the game in the sudden death moment. And I do like that mechanic of, like, I'm going to help work together with you, but, I'm also going to be a bastard and screw you over as soon as I can to win the game. Which I think is kind of that Cthulhu vibe, right? It's that kind of dark world where it's also bringing out the best and worst of us, right?
Yeah.
And you get to play the game representing the best and worst of humanity, right? Like, even as you're playing it, it's like, oh, the guy next to me is about to get killed by the Cthulhu and probably will tank the game, so I'm going to help him defeat the Cthulhu, the best of us. But then it's like, Actually, I want him to get damaged enough that he can't win. So
Yeah.
I'll wait.
You want the team to win, but you also want to be the only surviving member of the team.
Difficult
Yeah.
to pull off, and and I think that kind of double think that you've got to do in the game, that cognitive dissonance that has to occur. You've got to hold in your mind two competing concepts to help others and to help yourself. Yeah.
Just makes you think of the original Double Dragon arcade game, where the whole way through, if you're playing as a two-player game, it's a co-op until the very end after you beat the last boss, and then the other player becomes the final boss you need to fight to the death.
Really?
Yeah. In the two-player version of the original arcade Double Dragon, the final boss is the other player.
Yeah, wow. So you like it's like as a story, that's that moment where the betrayer, like you get betrayed at the end. It's like, what do you mean you're the bad guy?
It's not even that. They just fight to the death over
Or is
who gets to...
Or is it more like a Rocky moment? Like, Rocky and Apollo Creed have to fight at the end, like at Rocky 2 or whatever it is, or 3, right? They replay the fight from Rocky 1 because they have to fight.
The reason is because being a game release in the late 1980s. It is all about saving a kidnapped woman, and then you fight to the death at the end to see whoever gets to be with her in the end.
No.
And the two-player characters are also brothers, so I mean, this is the ultimate violation of bros before the other alternative.
That's so 1980s.
It's so 80s. I mean, it's based on Fist of the North Star, which is the climax.
Oh, really?
The climax of Fist of the North Star is two brothers fighting to the death. But yeah, it just reminds me of that, the whole idea that you're fighting against a common enemy until the very end, at which point suddenly the final boss is the person you've been assisting the entire time.
Yeah. Look, that's delicious to hear. That I wonder if there's a trope. We'll have to explore TV tropes. Is there a trope that expresses that help others but also help yourself? And I think in these days and ages, you want more texts that are about helping others than helping yourself. I mean, if anything, helping yourself is what's gotten so many, like the world, into so many problems with this kind of neoliberal narrative of exploitation of climate, of resources and so forth. Anyway, what did you think of the game, Australia, Zeke?
I liked it. I won, so that's a good sign. I think
you should have helped me first.
Oh, I did. We killed the Cthulhus.
Yeah.
I think you got 27 points, and I got 36 points. So decisive victory for
decisive.
For me,
that's a 25% difference.
Yeah. That's right.
Well,
so I enjoyed the game, is what I'm saying.
Okay. Glad to hear. All right, so we've got about another 6-7 minutes, so I want to go a little bit of news. Hold on, let me just do a bit of a palate cleanser.
It's appropriate that you mentioned Cheers and Frasier earlier, because that sounds like music that would play during a scene change in Frasier.
Yes, yeah. I don't know. There's something so comforting about that type of sting, because it's one that sounds so familiar from an 80s kind of like scene break. Yeah, I agree. I think that's the kind of scene break song or sound sting you'd hear in Cheers or Frasier or Family Ties. Any Family Ties fans here? All right, so news, news, huge news. I'm calling this Thor news. ABC's 5-decade partnership with Doctor Who ends after BBC confirms Disney Plus deal for 2023. Marcus, why didn't you tell me this was happening? You're usually so tapped in. Last week you didn't prepare me at all for this news.
It hadn't been revealed last week.
Jesus, I thought you were part of the you were part of like the secret, main artery.
No, I'm sorry. If anything,
how are the Doctor Who fans? I mean, you're part. Sorry, I cut you off.
There. If anything, I'm a vein in a limb rather than a main artery.
Now, I know you cosplay as David Tennant, and any other Doctor Who cosplay
that I have done personally, or that is
to establish your expertiseness.
I did a really, really bad closet cosplay of the 11th Doctor Matt Smith back in 2010.
What's a closet cosplay?
You make your cosplay out of stuff in your closet.
Yeah.
I had a jacket that I thought would be good for it, and I just wore that with like a pair of work pants and like this cheap shirt that I got from an op shop that looked somewhat similar.
Did people recognize you?
No.
Okay.
But no, I've got the blue suit and the brown suit and a trench coat. I can wear the trench coat with the brown suit because the sleeves are so tight I had to cut them off. And I wear the coat over it as a cheat, but the blue one I was like I spend a lot more on that, so I wear that as an actual suit.
Expert in Doctor Who, and what have you heard much reaction on the social media Doctor Who environment you're part of?
I haven't had a huge amount of response to it. I think largely because a lot of people. So the news that it is moving to Disney Plus, Doctor Who's moving from ABC to Disney Plus. Most people have Disney Plus anyway these days. It's one of the most popular streaming platforms.
You're so rich.
I actually use my friend. Sign in.
See?
So if Ty is listening, thank you for letting me use your Disney Plus account. I really do appreciate it. I showed my kids Alvin and the Chipmunks today at school. It was really boring. But it's not. I don't know, because I think a lot of people tend to watch it via streaming these days.
Yeah.
It's just, I guess, in a modern context, more and more difficult to sit down and watch something on TV when it's scheduled for a certain broadcast time.
And this would have been a financial decision, and it had nothing to do with the ABC in terms of it's not like the ABC lost it in a way. The BBC decided, I imagine, commercially, they put it out for tender or whatever. They put it out there, and the highest bid was from Disney Plus.
Oh, look, that's absolutely how it would have worked. The ABC doesn't have a huge amount of money to chuck around. Disney does, and they're also trying to, absorb every single multimedia franchise, every multimedia company under their banners. So really, when you think about it, it was just a matter of time. With the added benefit, now, the 13th Doctor will be able to be classified as a Disney princess.
Oh, you see, that's what I'm interested in. Talking of, what was it called? Intercontinuity.
The intercontinuity crossover.
Yes, this sets up the idea of an intercontinuity crossover in that Disney space world now with what do you got? Marvel, Disney
Star
princesses.
Wars, Disney princesses, Alien and Predator. So friendly reminder that Alien and Predator can now cross over with Doctor Who because they're all owned by Disney.
And you don't even not need to watch the Lego version, I imagine, for
No.
the hope that that'll happen. So other big news that was in this article from ABC News was that former Time Lord David Tennant will reprise his role as the Doctor for the first 3 episodes of the new series. This is the one coming out in 2023 to coincide with the show's 60th anniversary. Any news about that?
Reprise is a misnomer because, spoiler alert for a Regeneration story. The 13th Doctor, Jodie Whittaker, actually regenerates into the 14th Doctor, who is also played by David Tennant. Because in the past, there have been multi-Doctor stories where the Doctor has run into a previous incarnation of themselves and they've teamed up to fight some major enemy. But this is the first time where officially stated we've seen a Doctor regenerate into a new incarnation played by a prior actor.
Has this happened? Have I seen that? Has this episode aired?
Yeah, it's aired. It's aired. I haven't watched it myself. I'm trying to avoid spoilers because I am a season behind on Doctor Who. I just haven't watched Jodie Whittaker's most recent.
So in Jodie Whittaker, in her transformation scene, she changes into David Tennant.
She changes into David Tennant, yes.
Who was after Christopher Eccleston.
Yes. So numerically, David Tennant is the 10th Doctor. Now he is also the 14th because head writers keep on adding additional Doctors who we've never seen before, which makes the whole cataloguing process very difficult.
Wow. How does that make you feel that David Tennant's coming back in this fashion? Is it clever? Is it?
I think it is reasonably clever because it will give people it will give him a chance to play a slightly different version of the character. But I mean, at the same time, Doctors have gone through internal retools in the past where they've started playing. They developed and started playing a different version of themselves. Mm-hmm. But I guess it is a unique twist on the formula because generally the way that it's done is they'll announce that the incumbent Doctor is leaving. They'll announce who the incoming Doctor is, and there'll be a lot of hullabaloo about when the regeneration happens. So, but everyone knew that David Tennant was coming back for the 60th anniversary special. That got confirmed months and months ago.
You think it's one of those kind of previous models where it's like they'll team up?
Yeah, but no, he is actually he will be the main star of the 60th anniversary, and it is an interesting twist on the formula because Jodie Whittaker has left literally 2 months before Doctor Who's 60th anniversary year.
is that a reflection on how her series went, that they decided not to keep her as the main as the Doctor for that anniversary?
I think she just wanted to leave and do other things. That was just the way it was always going to be. I mean, working on Doctor Who is it's a punishing rap because you have to do a lot of location filming. They spend a lot of time on each of those episodes, and essentially every episode they scrap everything from the previous one. There's no recurring sets other than the TARDIS, and they have to rebuild every episode is an entirely different story with an entirely different set of characters, except the Doctor and their main traveling companions. So just working on it would be super exhausting.
So David Tennant has been announced, but the new Doctor, that will be the 15th Doctor, has also been announced.
Yes.
Do you know how to pronounce his name?
Isn't it Ncuti Gatwa?
Yep.
I believe we saw that.
Is that how you pronounce it? Right.
Yeah,
apparently,
Ncuti
according
Gatwa.
to this pronunciation guide, it's Ncuti.
And if you read something on the internet, it must be true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, every other source that I can find also says it that way, so I'm going to go with that.
And what's your take on that?
Ah, terrific casting choice. I've watched most of the first season of Sex Education, and Ncuti Gatwa is terrific in it. Just his mannerisms, his speech patterns, they're all very, very Doctor-esque, so I think he's a terrific choice. And it's also great because the costume that he wears, not a Doctor Who costume, but like the outfit that he wore in a lot of his sort of reveal publicity, it looked like something that Giorno Giovanna would have worn in Part 5 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
Oh, wow.
So if it was a JoJo reference, then it's an additional point.
And in the article, they also flashed up from the Doctor Who Twitter account the new logo, which they're doing.
Oh, yeah.
Which reminded me suddenly of the logo from, I don't know, this is like John Pertwee?
Yeah, new is a bit of a strong term. It's basically just hold on a second. So it's the logo that they used for John Pertwee's 5th season and for Tom Baker's first 6.
Yep.
That's just got a different color palette and shading and gradient.
Why would they do that, do you think? Why would they so consciously go for that Doctor Who label? Because like the more recent ones previously had really been complete escape from previous, type, cut face, and
I'd say it's because it's the most famous Doctor Who logo.
Yeah.
It's associated with what a lot of people consider to be the sort of the golden era of the show, from the mid to late 1970s is basically when the show was at its peak in terms of viewership.
Right. Yeah. So maybe with the 60th anniversary, they're really harkening back to a nostalgic tribute to recognizable branding.
What's the viewership of Doctor Who? Because I used to watch Doctor Who when it first came back, and then I think I dropped off somewhere after David Tennant, which I think you said you did as well.
Yeah. After David Tennant ran, I watched some of Matt Smith's, but yeah.
It's actually all over the place. Usually what happens, and this has happened with like a lot of previous classic Doctors as well, viewership will always start out reasonably strong with a new Doctor, but taper off towards the end. Then when a newer Doctor comes along, it gets a shot in the arm, the numbers go up again. The only real exception was Peter Capaldi's Doctor hemorrhaged numbers following Matt Smith. They went up again at the start of Jodie Whittaker, but they slowly decreased over her run.
Yeah. Okay.
The viewership is nowhere near what it used to be, either in the 2000s or in the 1970s. Still better than it was in the 1980s. The mid to late 1980s of Doctor Who is widely seen as the nadir of the entire franchise. But there's also the fact that there's streaming services these days, so a lot of people are not watching it on broadcast. So the number of people who watch it is something that it's much harder to judge than it would have been 30 odd years ago.
So the Disney Plus move might be about trying to just shore up that engagement with audience. The kind of reach that Disney Plus has will be bigger than your ABC, iView, or other mechanisms possibly. Yeah. Well, this has taken us to the end of the show. Coming up next, we've got You Can't Sit Down with Adrian. This has been Fud Craig. I'll make it work.
Fud Craig.
Fud Craig with B.A. Zeke.
That's me.
Yeah. And M.A. Marcus.
Peace out, y'all.
See, that's better.
Peace out, y'all. I'll just copy.
Keep listening to Edge Radio 99.3 FM. More great music around the corner. This has been Media Mothership for another week.
That's right. And you're listening to Talking in Riddles by Valium, a Tassie artist.